Thank you for joining our live stream for our One Book, One District event with E.B. Zoboi and a discussion of Nigeria Jones. So if you're watching this, thank you for tuning in. In the library here, we have students from our classes in 10th grade and 11th grade who have read Nigeria Jones. And as part of One Book, One District, this is the fourth time we've done this project. We have given out 1,000 copies of one singular book to try to get as many people in the community to talk about it, discuss it together. And we've certainly done that again with Nigeria Jones. So we're really thrilled today to be talking with the author, and our students have some really good questions for you, Amy. So we're really grateful for you to be here. So a little bit about our author. E.B. Zoboi is a New York Times best-selling author and a finalist for the National Book Award. Nigeria Jones, which is the book that the students read this year, was awarded the prestigious Coretta Scott King Award from the American Library Association. Her other works include Pride, American Street, Punching the Air, and Skin, which was just released last month. And we're so honored to be speaking with you today, Evie. So thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to meet with us.
Thank you. Can you see me?
We can.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So our students came up with all these questions themselves that they're going to ask you about your book and Nigeria Jones, the character specifically. So we're really thrilled to do that. And our first question, Nico, come on up here. Sit there when she gets done.
What inspired you to write Nigeria Jones?
Hi. So I am so pleased and slightly surprised that this book is a one book, one district pick. This is one book that I wrote for myself first. And in art, whatever art you're making, whether it's music, whether it's poetry, whether it's dance, sometimes you're told that make it for yourself first. Write a book or create art or make music for 100 versions of you. So this is a book that I wrote for 100 versions of myself. And there are big questions that I was asking about the world. And one of which is, what if there was a girl who looked like me who challenged the US Constitution? And in what ways she would challenge the Constitution and under what conditions she would challenge the Constitution. And I started writing this maybe 7, 8 years ago, but now it is more relevant than ever because the Constitution is supposed to support its citizens, but think about the laws that protect you. Think about the people who are supposed to protect you. Your family is supposed to protect you. Your parents are supposed to protect you, your community, your school, and your country. What if all those things fail to protect you? And what do you have to do for yourself so that you feel protected in your own body and in your own skin? So, what in this world makes sure that you will live the life that you dream of? So, I asked big questions before I started writing this book. And I wonder, I would love to see what questions you have about the world and about yourself too, because these are the things that inspire art making. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, anyone want to come up here? So while our next student is coming up, we had a lot of conversations about the Constitution and some of the characters' different views on their rights as outlined in the Constitution, and then also about institutions. And the students were very quick, and this is a credit to them, to talk about what institutions they function in their worlds, and also how how that might be easy to navigate at some points, and then not. So I won't steal their thunder, but
How much of Nigeria's experience is your own?
So that is a two-sided question. I did not grow up with like Nigeria at all. I did not grow up in a community like hers, nor did I have a father who shared her father's views. I grew up as an immigrant. I was born in Haiti, and I grew up with my mother, who was a single mother, but she was very strict. I did not grow up vegan, but I had certain foods that I had to eat. I had to bring my cultural foods to school as lunch. I was teased for being where I come from, and I wasn't allowed to be like a normal American teenager. So I think many of you can relate to whether or not you adhere to your family's values or whether or not you adhere to your maybe the values in your school or the values in your community. This is something that I think a lot of kids can relate to because when you are 16, 17, you're just coming into the space where you're about to leave home for college or leaving home to work full time or think about what it is that you want to do with your life. And many times, those are in direct contradiction to the way that you were raised. So that's what happened with to me. I was raised in a strict Catholic Haitian household, but when I went to school, not everybody had the same culture as my home, my family. So while, let's say, in my high school, we only wore like skirts, but I wanted to change into jeans. That's something very simple. Or at home, I'm eating rice and beans, but I want to bring a sandwich to school. So all of these relate to Nigerians breaking out of her father's strict codes of conduct. I had to do the same and break away from my mother's strict codes of conduct. But I also wanted to say something about isolated communities. Like it could be a church community, it could be a certain cultural community that makes you feel separate from the kids in your other school. So I used my life experiences to tell Nigeria's story, even though I didn't grow up exactly like her. Thank you for that question.
Nevaeh, you want to come up? All right, Nevaeh, here you go.
Okay. So my question is about the character Chloe. And the thing I wanted to ask was like the inspiration for her. Was it like, was she based on like a stereotypical mean girl, someone to challenge Nigeria's perspective? Was there someone you met in your life that, Chloe was based on, or was she just like a character to fill the cast?
You know what? You got to remind me. Who was Chloe? Chloe was this girl who challenged. Okay, I remember Sage. Chloe was the girl in her Infinity group, right? What,
Yeah,
you
she was the one like questioning why Nigeria was going black and like going to hang out with white Liam and all other white kids and like
yeah.
hanging out in a white school instead of being a movement girl.
Oh, yeah, that I needed an antagonist, right? Someone who really questions what their choice is. And I think we all have friends like that, right? We need somebody outside of ourselves to hold up a mirror so they could be like, well, why are you doing all of this? And is she fetishizing Liam? Someone needed to ask that question that wasn't an adult to make Nigeria question herself. So, yeah, I had friends like that all the time in different stages in my life, where even in middle school, there were girls who were just like, well, why do you dress like that? Or why don't you have a lunch, a sandwich like everybody else? Why don't you eat pizza? And then different questions come up in high school, different questions come up in adulthood, where there has to be one person in your life that calls you out. And I hope you all have that person in your life. And don't see them as the enemy necessarily. You can really consider their questions. You don't have to take their advice, but ask, if they're being like, well, why do you wear your hair like that? Or why do you wear your jeans like that? You consider it, and then you're like, well, because I want to. And I think we all need people like that in our lives to hold up a mirror to our actions. Thank you for that question.
Edie, you want to come up here? So we have another question about some of the characters in the book, and this is Edie who's going to ask this.
What was the process of developing characters that surround Nigeria, such as Kamau and Sage?
So, some of this, while I didn't grow up like Nigeria, I was part of communities or aware of communities like Nigeria's in adulthood, in early adulthood, like in college, more so in college. In college, there was something called the Black Student Union, and I was part of something called Africana Studies. When you all go to college, there may be, I hope, will be ethnic studies classes like women and gender studies. There will be Latinx studies, Africana studies, or Caribbean studies, depending on the school that you go to. This is where you will have niche if you're interested in like cultures from around the world, you will find those classes in college. So in coming into those spaces, I realized that those are not just singular, like you won't find one community in those spaces. I remember taking Black studies classes, and there were not just Black students in those classes. And because those classes ask really important questions, different kinds of kids were answering those questions and reading the same books, much like how you all look different or from different backgrounds and are reading Nigeria Jones, which I think is an excellent, excellent way to have you prepared, get you prepared for college and the kinds of books that you are reading. So Kamau is somebody who believes in her father's mission. And I needed somebody who believes in what her father is doing, even though she's questioning what her father is doing. Sage is somebody who represents what her father is keeping her away from or trying to keep her away from versus somebody who her mother befriended. I think we all don't exist in envelopes. And this is what I was trying to say. Even when your family or community wants you to be isolated, you still have to go out into the world and meet different kinds of people. And that's how you learn about yourself and the world. While Nigeria's father is keeping her like, you stay in the house and you believe what I believe in, she needs to step out and see the world for what it really is. So think about the ways in which you're isolated from the world. I think about, what if you go to New York City? What if you get a job in New York City, and think about the different kinds of people you will have to meet? And you will have to be able to interact with them and speak with them in a respectful manner, because the world is much bigger than your classroom, your school, or your community right now. So I had to expand Nigeria's world. People who want what she's like, want to be part of what she's coming from, and people who don't want to be a part of it, and they all challenge her. And this is the same answer for that I have for the question about Chloe. So everyone you meet from this point on should challenge your beliefs. And if you're not challenged, how will you grow? Thank you for that
Okay,
question.
thank you.
Jay? So in your last answer, you mentioned some of the books that that are filled in Nigeria Jones as part of her education, and the education she shares with others in the world of Nigeria Jones. And we talked a lot with the students about those books being like, this is your reading list, that if you read these books, you're going to learn so much about the world. And Jay's going to ask you about one of them that I have right here. I don't know if you can see from the Zoom, but I'm sure you recognize the illustration on the front. So she's going to ask you about that.
So I want to know if the story, If the People Could Fly, is that an influential book in your life, or is it something you just stumbled upon and thought it would be good to put in?
So I did stumble upon that book a long time ago, and it's very popular. And it's by an author who has since passed, named Virginia Hamilton, who dug into folktales, African American folktales, and shared it with her readers. So a part of this story is like a story within a story. I'm telling the story about this idea of people who are told one thing about them by society and believe another. So it's this idea that they believe they could fly, not like literally, but in terms of that they can surpass any sort of oppression that they're experienced. And the people could fly is a metaphor for freedom, right? In that there were enslaved Africans who were chained to their circumstances, but in their imagination and in their way of seeking freedom, they could fly. Flight was their way of just surpassing or overcoming whatever challenges they're going through. So her mother telling her the story over and over again is saying, I know your father is telling us that we are oppressed and we have to do X, Y, and Z to be free. But remember that you could fly, right? And it's a metaphor. It's a little bit of a magical realism that happens in the end, where it serves as a metaphor for you are not trapped in your body. You are never trapped in your body. You get to name your body, you get to make your own decision, but at the end of the day, you can soar above everything that society tells you about yourself. Thank you
You.
so much.
Thank you. All right, Miss Watson, you want to come up here? Ready?
Hi, my name is Anaya, and my question is, why did it take Nigeria so long to learn the truth about her mother?
Thank you. That is a great question. So I think a lot of readers have that question. So I dropped a little Easter egg, meaning a hint. So in the beginning, her father tells her that, that ancestors don't die. They return over and over again, right? And she's taught to believe that Black people or people of African descent come back to help for your liberation. So she's 16 years old. Think about the things that you were told as a child that you believe. Like the there's a little bit of echo. Okay. Like the tooth fairy, you might leave a tooth under your pillow when the tooth fairy comes and give you money. Santa Claus coming down a chimney, the Easter bunny. So she didn't grow up with those fairy tales, but the sort of fairy tale that she grew up was this idea that spirits come back. So she's believing it and she's taking it literally because she's experiencing some trauma in her life. She's experienced the trauma of what happened with her mother, but she's believing her mother has to come back because this is a fairy tale that she's told. So it sounds like, okay, a lot of people believe in reincarnation, but she grew up as understanding reincarnation like the Easter Bunny or the fairy, the Tooth Fairy, in that, oh, she's gonna come back because this is what my father told me. So it's not so much that she waited so long to learn what happened. She knows what happened, she suppresses it, but in the way that a lot of people they'll see their loved ones in heaven, her heaven is the return of her mother and that her mother didn't really leave, that her mother is coming back. Thank you for that.
Thank you. So I loved when I read the book for the first time. I was with Nigeria. I was with her, thinking she's gonna come back, right? And then you start to have these little clues, and the students kind of pointed out one of the things that really led them to believe, well, maybe she's gone, is the suitcase in the car that has, all of her clothes and then clothes for freedom. And I think it's a really beautiful kind of almost like the way that people could fly. That's about the disappearance of people. And that's something that I think happens in some of these tales, and like you said, magic realism and things like that. So, Eve.
Hi, I wanted to ask about what happened with Liam near the end of the story. I personally felt that his character was a bit unresolved, and we didn't really find out much what happened near the end of the story for him.
Thank you for that. So Liam is one of those characters where it wasn't really his story, right? This is Nigeria's story. And we're interested in Liam because of how Nigeria relates to him. But in the way that I'm thinking is that how does she resolve the relationship with him where it was an exploration, right? And that sounds really terrible, but I wanted to be honest about relationships for young people. Sometimes you have friends that come in, and the saying is that friends are here for a season or a reason. And for Liam, he was there for a season and a reason, in that she needed someone to validate or invalidate what her father has told her. And Liam represented that for her, where she doesn't know what will come of it. There's nothing that can happen. Think about the people that maybe you on a playground as a child and you made really great friends with some kid on the playground, and then you all both move your separate ways and you don't know what happened to them. But whose story do I follow as the author? Am I following Liam or am I following Nigeria? Liam is fine, he's doing well. But ultimately, I am following Nigeria. And the resolution for her was that I think for her, and I'm following her story, I think for her, it's just wasn't something that she was going to pursue in the first place because she was being messy. And I wanted to give her those character flaws. She was being messy and she took advantage of someone else out of curiosity. And I don't know if they would have had a real friendship, because you have to look back and think about the questions that she was asking him, where it wasn't about him as a person, Liam as a person, it was Liam as a white boy and not Liam as a person because of how she's been indoctrinated. And I wanted to stay true to her choices as a character. Thank you for that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Olivia, you next. So we had several community conversations. In addition to students, we went to local libraries in the community and did conversations with people of all ages. We had adults, young people, and one of the questions that kept coming up and would get so much momentum, which we talked about with the kids as well. One of the teachers used it as one of her assignments, was Team Liam or Team Chris. So I don't know if you've heard that around, but there was a very good debate. Yeah, someone over here just said Chris all the way. So there were lots of debates about that. So in your travels with this book, have you had people approach you about that question?
I'm going to pause for a second to say how I'm happy that this discussion is happening. You usually have those sort of like team this and team that in like a fantasy book or a more commercial book. But this is a literary intellectual book. And I made it so that there are kids who I know will read it and take their time to understand what's happening. But for the most part, it is about Nigeria's choices. And there were two like players in the two sides of her. So yes, it has come up before, and I don't have an opinion myself, but the discussion would be who is she? Who is
Right.
she at the end of the story? And who does she become maybe in adulthood? Who would she go for? When I got the award for Nigeria Jones, I related it to Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first Black woman who became a judge in the Supreme Court. Ketanji has an African name, but she was born here to African American parents. And Ketanji went to public school, was very smart, ended up at Harvard, and her husband is white. And I'm thinking about the choices that someone who is in spaces where no one looks like her, what options do you have for a romantic partner? And what choices do you make when you're the only one who looks like you, but someone finds you beautiful and someone wants to like show some love interest, but you have your community back home who doesn't look like this person? So in those, I'm asking myself those questions as well. Like if you were come from a community, but you meet somebody, and it doesn't have to be race, who doesn't represent your community, but they're interested in you, where does your allegiance lie?
And I'm so glad you shared that, because and the students will know this, when we started talking about that, it always started with like, oh, this person has these characteristics. That's what would make him good. This person has these characteristics. That was what would make him good. And then ultimately ending on, well, it's not about really those characteristics. It's about Nigeria and what her decisions are in this world that she's in. So thank you for sharing that. So this is Olivia.
Hi. Do you think Nigeria Jones speaks to a larger conversation happening in society right now about race and immigration and representation?
Absolutely, more so than when it was published or when more so than when I started writing it. So Nigeria is half Haitian. And a lot of I don't remember there were essays that were edited out, short essays that she was writing for her father's book, that ended up not being in the book. And one of the essays was about how America came to be. And I think I don't know if you're learning this, but it needs to be taught in that the Louisiana Purchase was because of the Haitian Revolution. Napoleon was defeated and he spent so much money trying to recapture Haiti. When he lost that acquisition, he had no money and needed to sell off that portion of America to Thomas Jefferson. And it was only because he was defeated in the war. And that's never talked about in American history, in that Nigeria is questioning the Constitution, but then she has a birthright to this country as well because of history. And her father is African American, her mother is Haitian. Does that make her American? And in what ways does that make her American? And in what ways she's protected by the Constitution? So immigration is about who gets to call themselves American. And one of the things, if I were there with you in person, and I do this with almost every school visit, I ask a series of questions and I make it fun so that, people have fun answering these questions. I ask with the first question, how many people in this room were born in another country? And you see the amount of hands that go up, and I don't get to see the audience, or how many people in this room have at least one parent who was born in another country, and you raise your hand. Oh, you're doing it now. Great.
Anybody?
How many people in the room have at least one parent who was born in another
Uh,
country?
I see two hands. Two hands.
Okay. Now let's see how many people in the room have at least one grandparent who was born in another country.
Grandparent?
More
Wow.
hands
Okay.
go up. Yeah.
Yeah, more.
And then it's not as fun because I don't get to see what your responses are. By the time I get to great grandparents or great great grandparents, you have at least like 90%, 80% of people raising their hands. And you realize like there's somebody in your lineage who was once a newcomer. Doesn't mean that everybody, but because this is America and because we are part of the global world, you have to have had somebody in your ancestry who first arrived to this country, and they then were immigrants. And what does that mean for your legacy? And what does that mean for relating to other people from around the world? So yes, this is what I'm also saying in the book is that who gets to claim this country when this country was founded on, or founded by people from other places calling this place home? Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
This is a great school, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
District,
the students are great. They read your novel with such care and thought, and they really, it's a voice that I think really speaks to them. And as a librarian too, and I could just talk to you for the next whatever, but as a librarian too, I read a lot of things, and I feel like the dialogue in this book in particular is so real, and this is how young people talk. So you nailed it.
Thank
This
you
is
so much.
Lexi.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, did the folklore about slaves flying away have anything to do with Nigeria wanting to fly away in freedom's name?
Yes, absolutely. There's something that happened in the end, just in case you didn't read it. But flight is a metaphor, as I said earlier. It's she's not flapping her wings, right? It is sort of just like this release of everything that binds you. Imagine that you could let go of all the things that you think like binds you to the perception of who you are. That is not who you are. So flight is that metaphor. It's the folklore of just being free. And she finds freedom in letting it all go. And that's when she finds her voice. So absolutely, it's a metaphor. Thank you for that question.
Samantha?
Um, so what first interests you in writing?
Oh man, I think I was isolated. I grew up in a strict, when I say strict, like I couldn't go to the mall or the movies or have a boyfriend, right? And I think people have different ideas of what growing up strict means. But my culture at home was very different in that my mother just didn't believe in just like having a boyfriend at 16. And she assumed like I was going to smoke if I went to the mall, right? And this is a long time ago. So think about, the ways in which your parents think the worst of you when you just want to hang out. So I started writing because I was isolated and lonely. I was writing journals to myself, letters to myself. Those letters became stories. Those stories eventually turned into poetry. And then I wanted to be a journalist to tell the truth. And then I became a poet again, and those poems turned into short stories. Short stories turned into novels. If you know my work, I write different kinds of books because I've had different kinds of experiences as someone growing up in New York City, but my brain is wired for storytelling. I love movies. I love listening to the lyrics in songs. I love the story behind everything. And if I was with you right now, I'd love to learn the story of Woodland Hills, the story of, am I in Pennsylvania here?
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. I would love to learn the story of Pittsburgh. You're on the opposite side of the state where Nigeria is set, right? It's set in Philadelphia. But I did a lot of research on Pennsylvania, and William Penn and the Quakers, who are all over the state. I hope you had a discussion on that too. But writing out of curiosity and needing to understand how the world works and how humans interact with each other and wanting to tell the truth. Thank you so much.
So a question I asked the students as we were reading this, particularly after Nigeria goes to the school and her dad kind of thinks it's an opportunity for her to like be a spy almost, like infiltrate the school. And a question I posed to the students was, is it possible to fit in and resist at the same time? And a lot of them thought yes, but only to a certain point. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the movement as it exists today, maybe, and how that fits or doesn't fit with some of these institutions.
So the movement is not something out of my own imagination. It is based on other separatist movements. One of them was called Move in Philadelphia. I hope your research would have taken you there, where it was led by someone with the last name Africa with a K. And it was the most recent and most tragic event in American history where the Philadelphia police bombed a set of civilian houses, regular people, citizens, because the neighbors were complaining because they had a very different lifestyle. They didn't believe in cutting their hair, so they wore their hair long. They didn't believe in the regular American education system. They didn't believe in keeping pets, but they did keep animals and didn't believe in cages. They were animal rights activists. They were health activists. They were into natural medicine. But we have groups like that all over the country. And most times they're not in the city, right? This is what made it complicated. They're, out in the woods somewhere. One of the books I read while writing American Street was Educated by Tara Westover, the Mormon community in Idaho or Utah, that part of the country, where they get to be autonomous. So in that sense, I think they were able to separate themselves, but they're still in the United States. The move had ideas of how to live. You're supposed to be free, and you do have the right to practice your own religion in this country, but do you? Who has the rights? And I think Nigeria's mother was saying something. She has memories of her mother saying, if only we could live like the Amish, right? Who gets to live like that? Who gets to separate themselves? Who gets to go off the grid? So, going back to your question, it's hard to do, but yes, to a certain point, as your students responded. You can't like have live animals and have a farm in your backyard in an urban space. There are rules against that. But can you have a farm? You can, absolutely. But who gets to be off the grid? So think about the members of Congress or government who try to speak out against the current government. And I was just reading this morning about a congressman or a Senate who was taken off the Senate floor because they were speaking out. So you can be a politician and speak out, but only to a certain point. It's always a balance and it's hard to do. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a very interesting answer, and we're about the end of our time here, and I just wanted to thank you so much for writing this book, and the conversations that it sparked among not only the students but the community has been really, really interesting, and it's made a lot of people think, and it was great to see at the community discussions, like I mentioned, all types of different people coming and sharing in the story of Nigeria. So one of the questions that we ask all of our guests that we have for our interaction series is there some book that you would recommend for these students who are in high school to read that you think that maybe in your youth was transformative, or you wish that you had it when you were their age?
So a book that a lot of people are reading right now, and I discovered it at the end of high school. No, at the beginning of college, but it was written towards my end of my high school year. So I was like a freshman when I read it. But is Parable of the Sower by Octavia Estelle Butler. Um, it's not YA, but it does feature a 15-year-old who was navigating some turbulent times. And I want you to read it as a symbol of hope, because it's not about the world falling apart. It's about how do you build community when you feel the world is falling apart.
Excellent. One of our teachers recommended that to our classes too. So thank you for that. And I just want to thank Jason Coleman, who's our tech person here, and my co-interaction series sponsor, Sarah Curtin and Margie Rem, who are the two teachers that taught your book. Our director of curriculum, Dr. Eddie Wilson, who purchased the books, and our three wonderful local libraries, the Carnegie Library of Braddock, C.C. Miller Library in Edgewood, and then the Carnegie Free Library of Swissvale. One of the libraries, the Braddock Carnegie Library, is actually the first Carnegie Library that he built in the United States, and it's right here in our school district. So those are kind of all of our partners. So thank you, Evie. This has been wonderful. Thank you, students, for this, and hopefully we'll see you sometime in Pittsburgh.
Thank you so much, Woodland Hills. I am so, so, so happy that you chose Nigeria Jones as your one book, one district read.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Juan. Bye-bye.